For years, we've all heard the story that the tech war between the US and China is all about economics, a fight for market share for who's going to be the next tech leader. But what if that's not the real story? What if it's not even the main story? Because the hidden driver behind this whole conflict, well, it isn't Wall Street, it's the Pentagon. I want you to just imagine this for a second. The F-35 Lightning II, right? The absolute pinnacle of American air power, is suddenly useless, bricked. Not by an enemy missile, but by a hidden command sent from halfway across the world. A command embedded in a microchip smaller than your fingernail. Now, this isn't science fiction. This is the exact nightmare scenario that triggered a quiet but very real panic inside the US military. And that nightmare scenario, it gets right to the heart of it. This chip war isn't really about profit margins. It's about military survival. And to understand how the world's most powerful military ended up in such a vulnerable position, well, we have to go back in time. So how did we get here? Well, this vulnerability wasn't something that just popped up overnight. Nope, it's the result of a slow, 60-year shift where the relationship between the Pentagon and the microchip industry completely flipped on its head.
Back in the 1960s, the Department of Defense wasn't just a customer of the brand new semiconductor industry, it was the customer. It accounted for over half of all integrated circuit sales. Its demand for chips in cutting-edge systems like the Minuteman II missile literally fueled the birth of Silicon Valley. The Pentagon had all the power. It could steer the direction of the entire industry. Okay, now, let's fast forward to today. The global semiconductor market is this $500 billion behemoth, and the Pentagon's share, it is absolutely plummeted to less than 1%. It's gone from being the engine of innovation to a tiny, low-volume, niche customer. The commercial market, driven by our phones and laptops, that's who calls the shots now. And look, the reason this happened is pretty straightforward. Their needs just became polar opposites. The military needs small batches of these incredibly durable, rugged chips that can last for decades inside a jet fighter. The commercial market, it needs millions and millions of cheap chips for a phone that, let's be honest, has a 2-year lifespan. Their priorities just became completely misaligned. And this wasn't an accident. It was actually cemented by a deliberate policy. Back in the 90s, the Pentagon, under Secretary of Defense William Perry, made a huge decision. It decided to use commercial off-the-shelf parts, or COTS, to save money and speed things up. It was a calculated risk, prioritizing short-term efficiency. But it came with this huge hidden cost. It tethered the entire U.S. defense industrial base to a global supply chain it no longer controlled. And that loss of control, it didn't just create a dependency. Oh no, it opened the door to a new and frankly terrifying kind of threat, turning the supply chain itself into a potential weapon. Just take a look at the journey of one critical chip for the F-35, a Field Programmable Gate Array, or FPGA. Think of it as a blank slate chip you can customize after it's built. Its journey is, well, it's a logistical nightmare. It's designed here in the US. Great. Then the blueprint gets sent to Taiwan for fabrication. From there, it might go to Malaysia or China for packaging. Then it often goes to another factory in China to get put on a circuit board before finally coming back to the US for assembly. Every single step is a point of vulnerability. This all leads to a concentration of risk that is just staggering. Over 90% of the world's most advanced logic chips, I'm talking the brains behind systems like the F-35, are manufactured in one place, Taiwan. Think about that paradox for a second. The combat readiness of America's best fighter jet depends entirely on the security of its main adversary's #1 military target. It's unbelievable. But the risk isn't just about the supply being cut off. The real deep fear is that the chips themselves could be turned into weapons. And this is done through something called a hardware Trojan. The best way to think about it is like a spy secretly adding a few extra hidden wires to a building's electrical plan. On command, those wires can shut everything down, or worse. So what can an adversary do with one of these? Well, they could create a remote kill switch, they could make it leak critical data, or even trigger a self-destruct sequence. And the scariest part? Because it can be as small as a few logic gates on a chip that has billions of them, it's almost impossible to find without literally destroying the chip to look for it. The threat has completely inverted. It's not about an enemy stealing your designs anymore. It's about an enemy building your weapons for you, but with a hidden backdoor. And if you think this is all just paranoia, it's not. In 2022, F-35 deliveries were actually halted after they discovered a simple magnet in the engine was made with an unauthorized alloy from China. I mean, think about that. If the Pentagon can't even track the origin of a simple magnet, how on earth can it guarantee the integrity of a microchip with a supply chain that is 1,000 times more complex and opaque?
So, faced with this, existential threat, the Pentagon began a radical, top-to-bottom overhaul of its entire strategy. The goal? To build a secure, resilient, domestic supply chain, basically a silicon fortress for the 21st century.
Okay, so the old way of doing things, the Trusted Foundry program, relied on trusting people inside physically secure facilities. The problem was it was always technologically behind the curve. The new model, called RAMP, is a complete 180. It moves to a zero-trust model. Instead of trusting people, it uses software and AI to mathematically prove that the final physical chip perfectly matches the original secure blueprint. This allows the military to securely use the best, most advanced commercial factories in the world. But a strategy this big, this ambitious? Well, it needs a massive financial engine, and that engine is the CHIPS and Science Act. Now, yeah, it was pitched to the public as an economic plan to create jobs, but let's be real. Its core purpose is unquestionably national security.
Hey, you don't have to take my word for it. Just listen to the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin himself. He said it plain as day. That is not the language of economic stimulus. That is the language of a new arms race, one where the battlefield is a silicon wafer.
And you can see it in how the money is being spent. $2 billion is creating something called the Microelectronics Commons, a network to speed up innovation from the lab to the factory floor. Another $3 billion is funding a secure enclave with Intel, basically a super high-security foundry within a foundry for the military's most secret, classified chips. This is the Pentagon's two-tiered strategy right there in black and white. Broad innovation for everyone, plus a high-security lane for its most critical needs. So the ambition here is absolutely immense. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Building this silicon fortress is far from a sure thing. It faces some really, really formidable challenges. First off, the cost. We're talking staggering numbers. A full reshoring of the supply chain could cost over $1 trillion. Second, there's a massive people problem, a projected shortfall of 67,000 skilled workers by 2030. Then you have criticisms of corporate welfare, right? And the huge strategic risk that this whole thing could just push China to become self-sufficient even faster. And that $1 trillion price tag, that's not just going to be paid by the government. It's going to trickle down to you and me. It'll act like a hidden security tax, potentially raising the price of every single product that contains a chip, from your car to your coffee maker, by an estimated 35 to 65%. And look, that labor shortage isn't some far-off future problem. It is happening right now. TSMC has already had to blame a lack of skilled workers for delays at its brand-new, multi-billion-dollar factory in Arizona. I mean, what good is a state-of-the-art facility if you don't have the people to actually run it? So, at the end of the day, this leaves us with the central question, the trillion-dollar question, really. Is this massive, unbelievably expensive push to rebuild America's chip industry a necessary solution to a terrifying national security threat? Or is it a gigantic gamble that could backfire and, in the long run, inadvertently create an even more formidable, independent, and resilient competitor?